one of the things he said over and over and over is mass deportation. They had signs printed up, didn't they, at the Republican convention of mass deportation. And it's 10 or 15 million people. He uses the number. And Stephen Miller seems to have plans for, camps to put them in, pending their, being flown out of the country, I suppose. And now Trump says it's going to be bloody. And he says it with sort of relish, not with regret, I've got to say. And I think, so the whole thing is pretty astonishing, I mean, it's one thing to think we should, I don't know, have tougher asylum policies at the border or just cut back on the numbers of immigrants. I don't agree with that, but people want to argue that. But this is really another level.
Hey, Bill. It was good to hang in Texas this weekend.
It was excellent. I really enjoyed both Dallas and Austin, and I enjoyed our panel, and I really enjoyed the people there. The Bulwark crowd was a good crowd. Bulwark America.
We do have a good crowd.
Bulwark America is healthy. The rest of America, not so sure.
I agree, particularly in the South. Red state Bulwark America is good. We have the liberals that were just desperate to have a cold glass of water with us, and the ex-Bushies who are equally appalled by us. So it was nice to see everybody. Thanks for coming out. Speaking of ex-Bushies who are appalled by what's happening in the world, we talked about Liz Cheney last week, but since our last podcast, she with Mark Leibovich in Austin with us said that her father, Dick Cheney, would also be supporting Kamala Harris. He put out a statement about how Trump is the greatest threat in the history of the republic. A couple of days after that, or maybe a day after that, W said he wasn't going to say anything. What are your thoughts on Dick Cheney? Does it matter? Does it have any import? Does it just make you feel nice on the inside?
Yeah, the latter, certainly. I'm not sure. I think cumulatively these matter. It would be good to get a few more people, obviously, the John Kellys and George W. Bushes of the world, the Chris Christies, who ran for president this year and said he couldn't support Trump. But the good news about Dick Cheney is I got a fair number of people in Austin and Dallas saying, I can't believe that if you had told me 20 years ago I'd be here agreeing with Bill Kristol or we'd be together on the same side, I just couldn't have believed it. And I feel like Dick Cheney gives me a lot of cover on that, because if they couldn't believe they would be with me, they really, really, really can't believe they're with Dick Cheney. I'm just like a moderate, mild kind of adjustment for them compared to Dick Cheney,
That's true. I do want the Dick Cheney and AOC joint ad for Kamala Harris. The thing about the Cheney statement that to me is important is he's, in two sentences, summing up what Liz is saying, right? Like that this is not about policy, right? That the race is not about policy, that this is about the threat of Donald Trump, the greatest threat that he sees. And that is something that obviously all of us here at the Bulwark agree with wholeheartedly. And like, that is the flabbergasting and frustrating part about all of this to me. It's just like, this is, this shouldn't be a hard call. Like when you read Dick Cheney's statement, it's like, this isn't a hard call. Like this other guy tried to overturn the democracy. He's this grave threat. Let's just beat him this one time. America can survive, and then we'll move on to fighting about all the things that all the Democrats hate about Dick Cheney in 2028. Right? Like that seems like a totally rational thing, and the fact that it's so few of them, and it's 2 in 1 family that are actually saying this, is I think kind of part of what's frustrating about this whole thing.
Yeah, I was struck, I think you probably were too, how many people, correctly pivoted quickly in our just conversations there in Austin from Dick Cheney has done this to, well, what about George W. Bush and what about all the others? And it's a very fair question. Right. And it's unclear what the answer is as to why they are avoiding saying what they truly believe. And it would be helpful for more of them to say, I think.
Yeah. And they put out, there was like a 6 bylined, I forget if it was Washington Post story or one of them, about how W's not saying anything. And I was like, why did it take 6 reporters to shake this tree loose? But this is the thing that's just frustrating with the W situation, is that I get it. W did not like that his predecessors were commenting on what he was doing when he was in there. He said that when he left the Oval Office, he was going to let those that followed him do the job, and that it wasn't beneficial for him to be weighing in and nitpicking in the news cycles. And I totally agree with that in principle. But again, like, we're in this situation where it's not a fucking close call. It's not a close call. Like, and people are not asking for W to come out and, kind of weigh in on Donald Trump's tariff policy, or, start to, go on the Nicole Wallace panel with me. Like, that's not the request. Like, the request is just to say that. Like, it's not a close call. I disagree with Kamala on things, but the other guy tried a coup. We need to move on from this. The four perilous horsemen of the apocalypse I always talk about have Donald Trump at the head of all four. And it's time to just vote for Kamala and move on. Why is that hard? That's the thing that's frustrating.
Yes, it's hard because she's a Democrat. And incidentally, I think they all, including W, supported subsequent candidates from their own parties. It's not as if former presidents don't support the next nominee of their party or the nominee after that. Bush and McCain didn't really get along, but remember, McCain met with him at the White House in 2008. Yeah. I assume, I don't have a specific memory of this, that Bush supported the Romney-Ryan ticket. So fine, he normally supports Republicans. This time he should support a Democrat. Just support the Harris-Walz ticket. What's so hard?
Yeah, or senators. He does fundraisers for senators. It's like the McMaster thing. It's like, oh, I'm not political. It's like, well, yeah, you are. Actually, you're not that political, right? You don't comment that much, but you have fundraisers for Republican senators and people So again, just put out one statement. Come on, W. I don't even know if it really matters. Does it even matter? I guess, would it even help? There's some libs that sometimes I see on Twitter respond to me. They're like, "Are we sure it wouldn't hurt for W to come after her?" And I think it would help, but for me, it's more just like I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. This is not a close fucking call. Just say it, and it's almost more about personal satisfaction, which is maybe probably not the most important thing facing us.
True.
You're nodding. Would it help? It would help.
I think it would help a little. I think cumulatively, no one of these maybe, but I think if you're on the fence a little bit, you haven't been paying attention, or either you're on the fence and you have your sophisticated, stupid Wall Street Journal editorial page reasons for, I can't be for Harris. This might say, you know what, I should be cast the vote. Or if you're really someone who's not paying attention, but you may vaguely admire Bush and so forth, voted from 15 years ago, whatever it was, 20 years ago, you might sort of say, okay, you know what, I think I'll vote for Harris. So yeah, I think it could push a few people over.
All right. Part of the reason you sense the agita in my voice is this New York Times poll over the weekend. Donald Trump leads Kamala Harris 48-47. It's a national poll. Some numbers that jumped out for me. Trump was 97-2 among his 2020 voters. He was leading among people that did not vote in 2020, 49-40. 47% saw Harris as too progressive. Only 32% saw Trump as too conservative. People see Trump as a change candidate. The numbers among young voters are bad, which you could look both ways. Maybe it's a bad poll sample, or maybe that's trouble. So anyway, what's your level of agita with the New York Times poll over the weekend?
It sort of fits into a general level of agita, which is, even the better polls have Harris up 1 or 2, basically. I mean, 1 or 2 are a little bigger than that. And the state polls are all +1 or even, basically, in every state.
Yeah, CBS, let me just throw in there. CBS right now has Kamala +1 in Michigan, +2 in Wisconsin, tied in Pennsylvania over the weekend.
And minus, is it the same poll or some other one? I saw -1 in Georgia and Arizona or something like that. So, yeah, so it's a dead even race, basically. I mean, this is all so much within the margin of error. It's foolish to almost, to overanalyze. And as I think we've discussed before, but it is upsetting that after everything, Trump has as much support, maybe slightly more support, than he had in 2020 or 2016. We saw him as president for 4 years. We saw January 6th. We've seen what he has said about what he will do in a second term, and he's pretty clear about that. We've seen the real radicalization of his movement in a way, doing things now and legitimizing and normalizing things now that even in 2021 or 2, I would say, didn't happen. The Tucker Carlson with the Nazi apologist and J.D. Vance, fine, everyone, they're all fine with Tucker Carlson. Or there's a little bit of a pushback, not too much, honestly, though. But again, that's something I think, so it's gotten worse. Things have gotten worse, and Trump's numbers have gotten slightly better. That strikes me as slightly problematic in terms of the country. Both the voters and the conservative elites. It's not as if conservative elites, despite Cheney and a couple of others, are deserting Trump either. The Wall Street Journal editorial page is where it was. I think some of them were a little more pro-Trump, don't you think, than they were maybe 4 years ago? I don't know. I feel like,
yeah, that also strikes me as strikes me as problematic. I do wonder, like, so on the one hand, it's natural among all of us in the anti-democracy movement to like get nervous and get our little underwear in a bunch when you see bad polls like this. But one thing that we had been talking about over the last couple of weeks is that there's a little bit of overconfidence. Like, this is a close race, right? And I do believe that it hurt Hillary that people thought she was inevitable in the end. I think it hurt turnout, and I think it hurt among some swing voters that didn't like her, that probably would have picked her, push come to shove. It hurt among some Bernie voters. I think it hurt among a couple different groups. So, and acceptance that this is a close race, is not necessarily a bad thing. I don't know. But then there's like the Simon Rosenberg theory of the case, where like these things are self-fulfilling and you want to feel like you're winning because winners go for winners. I don't know. Where do you fall on
No, I'm on the first one of that. You want people to be alarmed. Yeah. And I think the Simon Rosenberg theory, which was also the Karl Rove theory, he was always insistent that Bush was winning. It was great in 2000. And he really had, I talked to him once about it. I said, it's a little crazy, honestly, what you're saying. And, oh, no, you got to convey the impression of victory. And that's why they went to California a week out, because he was so confident that he could afford to go fight. People forget this, right? He spent 2 days flying to California and back to fight for California. And I remember saying, they hated me for saying this, honestly. I said this, I think it was quoted in the Washington Post on that weekend, saying, I think they've frittered away their lead. They could lose. Oh, no, you're crazy. Noted, Ari Fleischer called me, this has been noted in Austin. This is very bad for you to have said this, And I happen to be right in this case. So, no, I'm not on the side. I think voters actually don't like the kind of front-runnings, celebratory stuff. They kind of almost as a little bit of rallying to the underdog at times. And it's happened in race after race, right? You've been in some, the Gore got votes at the end when he was behind and being counted out in 2000. I think this has happened in other cases. So, I think you're right about Hillary. So I am for being alarmed.
Good. Same. So that's your silver lining when you see a bad poll, right, that you know that it will keep people focused. Quick aside on Karl Rove. Al Gore 53.5, George Bush 41 in California in 2000. So they lost that, but ended up losing that by 12 points. And Carl was with us in Austin this weekend and would not reveal his private ballot. So I've asked him to come onto the Bulwark podcast to discuss. We'll be just counting our chickens, because that's sure to happen any day now. Support for today's episode comes from my pals at OneSkin. Do you have a little bit too much fun this summer, this Labor Day? It's no secret that the UV rays can take a toll on our skin, leaving it dry, tired, and less vibrant. If you want to hit the undo button on UV-induced aging, say hello to OneSkin, your secret weapon against the sun's toll on your skin. OneSkin products are all powered by the revolutionary OS1 peptide. This proprietary peptide is scientifically proven to reduce dysfunctional, also called senescent cells, a central source of skin aging. Their scientists have shown that it can actually reverse the biological age of skin by several years in their groundbreaking research. Healthier, more youthful-looking skin doesn't just look great, which we all want, obviously, but it's good for your overall health, too. As the leaves change color this fall, help your skin undergo its own transformation with OneSkin. For a limited time, our listeners can get 15% off OneSkin with our code BULWARK at oneskin.co. For a while this summer, the summer toll on my skin was a problem, and you needed moisturizing to deal with that. But lately, I've been sitting here in my box talking to you guys at the screen, and I'm telling you, no sun and dry skin also becomes a problem. You want to look fresh. I'm staring at myself now all the time. YouTube, you guys are sending me the links, about my Piers Morgan fight, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, ugh, I gotta double my dose of OneSkin. I've been spending too much time in my pinto bean box up in the room, and I'm telling you, it makes a difference. When I forget to put it on versus when I do put it on, I can tell. And that's because OneSkin is leveraging their in-house cutting-edge R&D platform. They were able to measure the efficacy of age reversal molecules in their lab by staining skin samples for senescent cells and analyzing changes to the skin's genetic data before and after exposure to the OS1 peptide. OneSkin scientists found that OS1 peptide reverses skin's biological age by reducing the number of senescent cells by up to 50%. OneSkin is the world's first skin longevity company. OneSkin addresses skin health at the molecular level, targeting the root causes of aging so skin behaves, feels, and appears younger. It's time to get started with your new face, eye, and body routine at a discounted rate today. Get 15% off with the code Bulwark at oneskin.co. That's 15% off oneskin.co with code Bulwark. After you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. We only have one body, one skin, and only you can choose to make it better. Age healthy with OneSkin. The ads imbalance I wanted to talk to you about. Not imbalance, maybe it's just interesting. So I was watching, I had a little bit of time for football over the weekend. Been churning out content, and I took like 18 hours with my child. We went to the Audubon Park, came home, turned on the football game, had a little delivery, and you know the YouTube TV NFL these days, you got the 4-box, and so you get to see the commercials though also in the 4-box in all of the different markets. And the Kamala commercials are Kamala talking about economic opportunity, and the Trump commercials are about Kamala and how she's terrible and immigration, and there's like a you know the criminals that have been let out and economic stuff. So in a way, like the media discussion about the race is like a lot about Trump and maybe a little balanced. Right? It's a little bit about both, but like the paid portion of this race is all about Kamala, like Kamala introducing herself, Trump trying to hit Kamala. So anyway, I'm just curious what you think about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, one way to put it is analytically, I think for us and really for the country, I mean, in truth, the race is about Trump. I mean, the issue is Donald Trump going to have a second term as president or not? And Kamala is a perfectly acceptable alternative. And so would be Shapiro and Polis and, you know, Whitmer and many, many other people. And I don't mean to minimize her distinctive, you know, virtues and maybe also limitations, but analytically, the headline is Trump. The headline in the history books will be Trump wins or Trump loses, probably. But that doesn't mean that politically the most important thing couldn't be people's judgment of Kamala Harris, because everyone knows all about Trump. So there's a funny disconnect, I think, where we, being pro-democracy types, want to talk about Trump, and we should, and it's important to, but as an actual political tactics and strategy matter, it's about Harris clearing a bar of likability and favorability and presidential, you know, character and toughness and so forth. And so it makes sense that they're both focused on Kamala. The positive ads, I think, are pretty good. You know, a little bland, a little generic, I would say, maybe. I prefer a little more personal. I think the personal bio stuff is stronger than they think, but they have a lot of data and I don't. But one thing that made me nervous over the weekends, we're going to talk to a friend in Pennsylvania who's seeing, all he does is, of course, he watches football and it's like nonstop ads. Someone told me this. They're extending the local news in some parts of Pennsylvania, I think other states, from like, I don't know, an hour to an hour and a half or something in October. There's such demand to buy ads, you know, on news adjacencies, right? Because it's the best place to buy a political ad, presumably some of the kind of people who watch local news, that they, you know, they have to fill up the news, you know, like high school sports, you know, big development. So just so they can sell ads.
Cat stuck in tree in Harrisburg.
They make a lot of money off these campaigns. He said that his judgment was that there was damage being done in Western Pennsylvania on immigration with the negative ads, and that he personally has run into people. He's voting for Harris, but he moves into broad circles and run into people who are either seeing actual news stories about this, some story about Haitians in Ohio. I haven't followed this, that they're blowing away wildly out of proportion, maybe not even out of proportion, just inventing, maybe, I don't know. And then there are other stories, you know, all the immigration scare stories are being promoted on social media, and then the ads are promoting them as well. So that's his concern, is that the negative ads are maybe a little more powerful than the positive ads. So I don't quarrel with, as a tactical matter, the Harris campaign thinking their key task is to make her increase her favorable numbers.
Yeah, I agree. I don't want to be sexist here, but I don't get, like, in the one positive ad you're seeing everywhere, she's in like a living room with flowers. It's a feminine set. I don't know. I thought that the convention was very much like a prosecutorial set, which I liked, you know? And I don't know. So anyway, it's just a thing. And the negatives, I don't think negative ads on Trump really work at this point. Right. Like, people know Trump, but just what I don't like is just like the air that people are breathing has negative Kamala, positive Kamala, and not a lot about him. And I almost just want them to get negative Trump stuff just to kind of bring a balance to it, less that it's going to be, moving people. But anyway, on the immigration thing, Trump was in Mosinee, Wisconsin over the weekend, and boy, I don't know. Here he is talking about immigration, and for some reason he's talking about Colorado and Jared Polis. But let's take a listen.
They are radicals headed up by a radical governor in Colorado that has no clue how to solve this influx of crime into his state. And by the way, Colorado's one state. It's much worse in other states. But in Colorado, they've taken over. I mean, in Colorado, they're so brazen, they're taking over sections of the state. And, getting them out will be a bloody story. Should have never been allowed to come into our country. Nobody checked.
So, on the one hand, we just have this hallucination that there are parts of Denver that have been taken over by migrant gangs, which I'm pretty sure is not happening. I've a decent amount of on-the-ground sources in Colorado there between friends and family. But the line there that really struck me is getting them out is going to be bloody.
Yeah.
And I do think that is an underappreciated element when thinking about what Trump has planned.
I mean, at some point, you do have to believe what he says. And one of the things he said over and over and over is mass deportation. They had signs printed up, didn't they, at the Republican convention of mass deportation. And it's 10 or 15 million people. He uses the number. And Stephen Miller seems to have plans for, camps to put them in, pending their, being flown out of the country, I suppose. And now Trump says it's going to be bloody. And he says it with sort of relish, not with regret, I've got to say. And I think... So the whole thing is pretty astonishing, I mean, it's one thing to think we should, I don't know, have tougher asylum policies at the border or just cut back on the numbers of immigrants. I don't agree with that, but if people want to argue that. But this is really another level. And this is where I think your previous point is important. Maybe people need to make a bit of a point of this on paid media, the extremism in Trump. There was that poll last week that I think we talked about maybe, that CNN, that people do think Trump is more extreme than Harris, and they don't like the extremism. And bringing home the extremism from Trump, I'm a little worried that's kind of sliding away, and people aren't focused enough on that.
I agree. One more thing on this point. He put out one of these crazy bleats the other day, and I like the way that Axios framed it up. Alex Thompson wrote, President Trump is now proposing 2 of the largest ever federal arrests of people living in America, including U.S. citizens, if he's reelected, adversaries and immigrants. He gets into the immigrants part and then goes into the Trump on Truth Social. When I win, the people that cheated will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. Legal exposure extends to lawyers, political operatives, donors, illegal voters, and corrupt election officials. So I guess we're on the list there. I mean, I get how some of this is like people push it away because it's bluster a little. They're like, oh, whatever. He's not going to do this. This is bluster. But like from the voters out there that have a libertarian streak, these former Republican voters, I do think that is an important frame. Like whatever actually happens, his plan is 2 of the largest mass arrests in the country. This bloody deportation we just talked about and vengeance against political foes.
Lock them up was a bad thing in 2016. It's lock her up, rather, right? It's against the rule of law to be, to say you're going to lock someone up without trials and due process and so forth. But to be fair, the crowd was kind of chanting it. I don't know if Trump started it or the crowd started it. Trump sort of played along. It was always understood to be a little bit, I don't know, rhetorical, let's just say. Here he's going out of his way to threaten not one person who's, famous and presumably it's the same part of the campaign, but a whole bunch of people ranging from journalists to donors, quite specific, really. He's kind of thought about this a lot, right? And I got to get the donors, I got to get the operatives, I got to get the, journalists.
Yeah.
I've got different parts of the government going after each of them and different camps maybe for us as opposed to some of the others. Do we get to stay with the donors? They probably get a nicer place, I don't know, which is
or maybe the inverse.
Yeah. Anyway, so no, it's bad. We're laughing about it, but it's terrible. It's unbelievable, really. When is it? I mean, has anyone ever said anything like this before? Running for president of the United States who is at all respectable? I mean, it really is.
No, of course not. Of course not. And it would not pass an acceptable bar. And I do think you make an important point because sometimes, particularly in like the cable news and this podcast world, you get in these situations where Trump is in an interview and some clever reporter is like, are you interested in arresting your political foes? And he does the kind of like, well, we're gonna have to look into it. And like, and there's that thing, right, that happens, right? And then people are like, Trump leaves door open to arresting foes, which is still bad, right? Like that's still an easy question. You say no, but it is a category difference from literally putting out a plan that's like, here are all the people that I'm going to arrest and punish long-term prison sentences. It's fucking horrible. One sentence on the debate. You have any thoughts, any deep thoughts or expectations for the debate tomorrow?
It's nerve-wracking. It's my deep thought. What are we going to do for the next?
Same.
What are we going to do for the next 24, 36 hours? I mean, do you have a plan for kind of handling the Tuesday? It's been, election day is always the worst day, right? When you work on campaigns, debate day is also a bad day, and this is kind of important, but maybe the only debate in a dead even race where people don't know one of the candidates well. Yikes.
Pepto-Bismol and close your ears, Mom. Cigarettes for me, I think. I don't want just hearing you mention that. This is why we didn't spend the whole day. I can't do 2 podcasts doing debate preview. It is my stomach. I've got stomach pains just thinking about it. And we'll do it tomorrow. We'll do a debate preview tomorrow.